Metal doors, backward fences, scaling cranes, and blocked windows with dynamic time? For my opinions and predictions on the desert map, you'll want to stay tuned. Hey guys, Mike here with Things You Might Like, and today I wanted to go over these photos that were released for the desert map. I think they're really interesting and they have a lot of cool details that I wanted to go over and cover the things that I noticed. Now, I want to issue a little bit of a challenge today. If I find something that you found interesting, would you mind sending a like my way or even subscribing if you feel like I've earned your subscription? I have a lot of content coming out regarding Battlegrounds. I like doing tips and trick videos. So if you like this kind of stuff, you can subscribe by hitting the little button below. So let's jump right into it. So let's start off with this first image. First of all, my first impression about all these images is that they look incredible. I definitely think this is in-game footage, mostly by the way the grass is rendering. I feel like if they did some high pixel render that it would look even better. But I think this is in-game footage, and I don't know, it looks great. I love the detail. I love the variance in all of the terrain, and you have this green shrubbery and tan shrubbery all mixed in. I mean, they capture the desert feeling really well, and I like that a lot. These hills are very dynamic, and I think that will play huge in the gameplay. And while this all looks open, the thing that's interesting to me is that there's plenty of tactical terrain. If someone was up on this hill and you were down here, I feel like between all the little bumps and the houses and the vehicles, you aren't necessarily at a huge risk or at a disadvantage to be able to fight back. So I think that's really interesting that they're able to make a simple scene like this extremely dynamic. One thing I wanted to point out was actually this door right here. Let me see if I can get in on it. It looks like a tin door. It might just be wood, but it kind of looks tin to me, like those tin roofs. And if that's the case, oh, in fact, it has a tin roof right here. If that's the case, I wonder if they are going to have some doors that are not breakable. Currently, obviously, you can blow through doors with a shotgun especially. So I wonder if they're going to introduce a new kind of metal door that possibly is not breakable. So these little huts, while they seem quite exposed, you at least have that type of protection. So something I noticed that I just think is interesting. So here we have the second image in the series, and the first thing I noticed were these palm trees, and not just the fact that they're palm trees. I actually grew up in California, and I love palm trees. They're my favorite. But the density of the palm trees is what's interesting to me. You don't find this kind of large tree density in Erangel at the current gameplay doesn't allow that. And so I think this will provide very interesting cover for people who run around. Being able to snake in and out of these trees I think will be really tactical, and it's cool how they still go up the hillside on these rocky hills. That's not something we really see in our current map. So that'll be interesting to see how that's done throughout the map. You can see super high density up here, and I just really like that, and I like the diversity there with the trees being all over the landscape. Secondly, aren't prison fences supposed to face inward towards the courtyard? Maybe I'm wrong about that, and let me know if I'm wrong. That's totally fine. But I always thought that they faced in because they're meant to keep inmates in rather than facing out. So I don't know. Maybe that's a detail they overlooked, or I'm completely off. Maybe they're supposed to walk through here, but it looks like this is the courtyard, and I'm just surprised those aren't facing in. Anyway, another point that I think is interesting are these towers up here. If these are accessible, I think they'll prove to be a very interesting style of play, because if you notice, they're tinted. They're not your usual open windows. So if you're able to somehow scale it and climb up, you can see people, but if you engage, I assume that then they'll shatter, and it'll be extremely obvious if someone has been in here, because you'll see black windows and then all of a sudden one completely shattered out. So I like that. It's just a very dynamic play style, a new way to use the map, and it looks like this could be high risk, high reward. If you blow out windows and you're killing people, then people obviously notice you're there and you could be stuck, or just a new style of gameplay. And if that's the case, I hope they introduce that just to see how that plays out. I think that could be really cool. And the other really notable thing in this image are just, again, these hills, just how dynamic they are. I think they look amazing. I can't say that enough. All the terrain in this, they took what they learned with the previous map and took it to the next level, because it just looks incredible. So I appreciate the work that they've done to make this truly a dynamic scene. These last two images I think are the most interesting by far. And let me explain that. Look at this map and try to look at it through the eyes of being able to vault, which can be extremely difficult considering when we're looking at, running up this and going inside these doors, getting around this map, we're used to thinking of it at a current play level. But once vaulting is introduced, it makes areas like this way more dynamic. So for example, and shout out to Wacky Jackie, who actually pointed this one out that I think was a huge get. A good job to him for thinking of it. These cars right here are strategically positioned below these awnings, and I think that's so we can vault up, and then we can have this whole walkway right here for a vantage point while still maintaining some of the cover. So thanks Wacky Jackie for that one. Great catch there. But it extends beyond just this area right here. Even things like this wall, it's a pretty high wall, but if this is within the realm of scalability, then being able to get around this wall so you don't have to run all the way up or all the way back, I think there's a lot of instances in this map that are going to take advantage of the vaulting and make that a huge factor in the gameplay and how well we can get around the map. I mean, that extends obviously to the current map as well. Vaulting is going to change the game at a fundamental level, so it's going to be interesting to see how it does it specifically with this map, and I think this area is a good representation of how we can see that happen. Another question that I have are these smokestacks and really all these really high places. The cranes, there's lots of cranes. I think that's so cool to see all this building going on. Are they scalable? You can see these patterns going up the sides. I don't know if those are stairs. My guess is probably not, but again, like I said about the prison yard with the towers there, it'd be interesting to just have this as an option to see how it plays out in the gameplay. If they have it and they're worthless, people just won't use them. But if they add that little detail, I think that will be nice, and I think that would just be a cool thing for them to do with this area. And the last thing that I was curious about with this scene is, who the heck is this guy? I want to hear guesses. Let me know in the comments below who you think this statue is of, because I think that's a pretty interesting detail to bring a statue like this into the scene. Alright, moving on to the final photo. So to me, this one raises the most questions on how they're going to implement certain things in the gameplay. The first thing I want to point out is that all of these roofs, from what I can see, every single one does not have a roof access into the lower parts of the building. There's no way, there's no door that accesses a stairwell to go down from any roof that I can see. I mean, maybe that's one, but I don't think so. So it looks like in this map, they're going to be replacing those roof access with these fire escapes, which brings up a lot of interesting points. First of all, this makes you much more exposed when you're going up and down from the roof. And secondly, what this allows them to do is put, these 5-10 story buildings without having to make every single floor accessible. It looks like here that these floors are not accessible on every single level, which I think is a good thing. When initially looking at this image, I think people might have the thought that every single one of these floors were going to be accessible in game, and I don't think that's the case, and I hope that that's not the case, because in a map like this, if you were to take every single one of these floors, chop them off, and take that square footage and lay it throughout the map, this area right here all by itself could probably house a 100-person, free-for-all battle royale, because that is so much area to cover, and this is just one tiny portion of the map. So it'll be interesting to see how they finally implement this, but I really don't think that every single floor is going to be scalable or accessible in this area. Maybe some will and some won't, which will make it easier for people who, once they learn the map, will be able to pinpoint what floors to look at. One giveaway with this, I think, is these windows. They look completely shut in. They don't look as strategic as these guys over here that are wide open and might be able to allow people to shoot in and out of. It looks like this is shut down, but I hope they implement at least some floors, because if this whole thing is shut down and all it is this roof, a stair access, and then the ground level, I think that's a huge waste of space, and no one's going to go up here because, okay, they get a little bit of loot up here, and then they have to traverse all of these stairs just to get to the floor without being able to take advantage of any other loot in this building. So, that's what I'm not so sure about, but at the moment it looks like the taller buildings have these windows cut off here, whereas the lower buildings have open windows still. So we'll see how they implement that in game, because these present an entirely different game dynamic, and it'll be interesting to see how they implement that. Another thing I was considering is that if they do not fix the circle, the final circle in this area, it could cause huge issues because there are so many buildings and there's so many stories. If they do allow access inside all of these buildings, and say the circle ends inside the building, you could have people on 3, 4, 5, 6 different levels who could get stuck in the building. You know, hopefully you realize that before the circle gets that small, but it does create issues with the final circle, or I could see it creating issues. So hopefully they fix that so that it never closes on one of these buildings and it doesn't trap, you know, half the remaining people inside, because these buildings are so vast, so big, that potentially you could house a ton of guys in here on different floors in different rooms and they don't even see each other. That being said, it would be cool if they opened this all up, made this a teeny tiny map as like a custom mod game, and then went ahead and you could do 100 people in this tiny area. I think that could be kind of fun. Make a really fast game, high kill count. I think this is dynamic enough to allow that. If you look at the size of these vehicles down here, you know, a guy is yay high as far as my cursor's moving. Sorry, that's not a great example. But with how small a guy is right there on this map, all the way within this circle right here, you absolutely could have 100 guys if all of these rooms were accessible. Anyway, so just kind of a little idea there. And then lastly, the cool thing that I noticed was just this little racetrack right here. Totally new element. I mean, there's a lot of new elements, but this one was just really neat. They tuck it back in there. I don't know. I wonder if there'll be good loot right on the inside of it. That would be really cool and strategic, because if there's good loot in there, do you want to go for it when it's surrounded by all of these roofs where people can see? So I think they're going to make that a really high loot spot and a high risk spot. That'd be cool. Alright, and the very last thing that I noticed that I haven't seen anybody else talk about, and thanks for sticking around with me this far, trust me, I think this is worth it. Did anybody notice the sun in each of these photos? Let me go back. So I'm in the last photo now. If I go back, you know, the sun's about right here. This one's about the same spot. This one's much lower, and this one looks much higher. In the current game, the sun sits pretty high. I mean, we're talking somewhere between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. The sun is really high in the sky. So this is already lower than that. For the dusk sun, it's much lower than this. It's right at the horizon, and these two are right in between those previous ones. So to me, that says that there is a slight possibility that there could be dynamic time in the game. So over the course of the game, it could get darker, the sun could get lower, maybe shadows get longer. And if they add that, I think that would be really, really cool. Again, another dynamic thing that as you play and it gets later, the shadows get longer and it can be harder to see people. You know, over the course of the game, it maybe starts like this, ends like this. Only in some games, though, maybe they could be called sunset games. I think that would just be excellent. Can you imagine finally getting that chicken dinner, your gun firing in the air while the sun is setting in the background? I mean, it just opens up a lot of cool possibilities. It's a very simple idea, but I think if they do implement something like that, it could add a lot to the game. So thanks for sticking around, guys. I know this was a very new type of video. I enjoyed going through it and analyzing these photos. I hope you enjoyed it too. If you liked it, go ahead and click the like button, and hopefully I earned your subscription with some of these things that I pointed out today. Thanks for stopping by. This is Mike with Things You Might Like, and I will see you with my next cool thing.